Hello there and welcome. Today, I'm making a second attempt at finishing the season after the first attempt got corrupted footage. It's my fault really, we had a power cut, the footage got corrupted and I'm gonna have to try again. So the goal here today is going to be to finish this season, which honestly some of you might disagree with, and that is absolutely fine. There are interesting tracks left here: Spa, Zandvoort, Monza, Baku, Singapore, Austin, Mexico, Sao Paulo, Las Vegas, Lusail, and yes, Ireland. And in the essence that this is kind of a teaching slash guide playthrough that you can play along, you might need to still do some of these races manually to perform well. There are a couple of guides that I have on that, particularly a strategy guide for each track, things like that. But in general, the reason that why I'm going to be simulating the rest of the season is twofold. We are currently not in a position where we can gain or lose anything from these next 10 or so races. And what I mean by that is, if we take a quick look at the standings, we have 160 points. We have no chance really of catching top 3 teams. They're just a little bit too quick for us to really do anything. And the bottom teams here, Aston, RB, and Mercedes, even if they catch us, that's not really a bad thing. And what I mean by that is the board wants us to finish 6th. So honestly, we can lose 2 positions here to Mercedes and RB and still be fine in the eyes of the board. And honestly, in your first year, that's really all you need to worry about, what the board wants. Also, next year is going to be the big regulation change season, so us finishing lower than our current situation is actually a benefit to us. It would be a positive thing. So keep that in mind as well. Because we're going to focus on just getting through this season and get started on season 2, we are also going to be focusing mostly on the research aspect of the game. We should keep things a little bit interesting. But let's see if we can put a new car together. Now, currently we have made a couple of extra parts. We do this because over the summer break you can actually make quite a few of them, and it's nice to have a few spares lying around. Now, as I mentioned also, we are going to be focusing on research. Sidepod here is still getting made, but basically the final design. Then we're going to be spending the rest of the year just researching as we go. Spa is happening in 4 days, so it's going to be after Spa before we get these designs done. Let's just get that over with. We've also accepted a contract here with Wheatley, which should give us a very, very good sporting director. And also just a quick heads up here, this is now transitioned to 1.6. 1.6 has some bug, particularly with contracts, which means that our driver transfers at the end of this year are probably going to be a little bit wild. So we'll have to see how we handle that. But yeah, next season we have Balbo, next season we have Wheatley, and that should honestly be fine. If anyone picks up Harmon, we will be happy with that. But yeah, also for those of you who asked last time, am I going to replace Ocon with Duan? Most likely not. 28 million is what that would cost us currently to do. So Ocon is probably going to stay for the time being, as it just is not viable without an editor to really replace him. And I don't want to use the editor for this speedrun save if I can avoid it. With that said, let us head to Belgium and see how the simulation of that race goes. And I might as well talk you through how a simulation works. It's actually pretty straightforward and simple. Howard has also accepted his new contract. We're going to go ahead and hire him. And the new contract system is also pretty good, which we'll go through in a second. But the AI kind of is still misusing that, so be aware of that. 1.6 contracts are still a little bit buggy. Hopefully that will be ironed out. So when you want to simulate a race weekend, we have gone over this a little bit earlier in the season, but generally it is pretty straightforward. And depending on how much effort you want to put into it, it can be over in as little as 30 seconds, or you can, set up your cars, practice and quali in order to get a little bit of a confidence boost, which in general would help your drivers. But in our case, because we kind of are locked in, as I mentioned, we're not really going to put in that much effort because we don't need to. And again, some of you are probably going to be a little bit upset with me for this, but it is literally a decision made in order to speed up progression a little bit and focus on research for this part. But yeah, that's it. Basically 2 clicks and you'll be through a regular race weekend. Let's see how our boys performed. So both of our boys didn't score points. Gasly on the cusp and Ocon crashed out. That's not a great start, honestly. Rick scored points, but that is about it. Merc scored points. They didn't score a lot though, so that's still going to take a while for them to catch up to us. 7, 4, and 2. And with 10 races remaining, that still leaves us in a safe gap. They need to score more than 7 points a race weekend to catch up with us. But yeah, Alcon's crash could be very costly for us. We'll have to see exactly what happened to him. That's the only negative by simulating. You'll generally end up with more crashes because you aren't manually taking control. And you'll also end up with, to a certain degree, more incidents. And that is pretty bad for you. Let's go ahead and see what happened. He has destroyed his ERS, which means we need to buy a new one next race weekend. He has destroyed his gearbox, which most likely means he needs a new one before the end of the year. And while this engine has been somewhat destroyed, we can probably still limp towards the end of the season with the parts that he has. And also, he just destroyed the side pod and the underfloor. So a pretty hard crash, all things considered, but not the you know, financial bomb that we might have feared. We're also going to be making parts now through the summer break, so if you wanted to crash, this is probably the best time. And we are going to take a look at once the side pod is done at the new design that we made. In terms of what I want to do before the end of the year here, it is going to be to still focus on the rear wing. Focus on everything, really. And this is actually something that you should take a look at when you do this, and that is going to rules and regulations. And here you can see actually what your research has done and what the regulation change will do. So for the suspension here, we've actually done an amazing job. For underfloor, still need to put in a little bit of work. Same for the side pods. The rear wing here has actually been massively outdone. The front wing needs a little bit of work. The chassis has been done. So basically, we need to do a little bit on the underfloor and the side pod. So we might as well get those two researches started. And for the underfloor, I'm going to be lazy and just focus on every type of cornering. Although the most powerful cornering on your underfloor is going to be your high speed. The other two are also kind of important. So we're just going to do that. For our side pod here, we're going to be a little bit more boring and focus on the airflow middle, as well as the drag, as well as the cooling, or minimizing drag reduction. You can maximize drag reduction on this as well. There's no real negatives with that, but I would like to build up that engine cooling a little bit going into next year, so we can ensure that we don't have to spend any unnecessary money on new parts. Okay, we have our next project coming in 9 days, so we'll go get that done. We have a few things going here. Oh, I don't want to do engineer team size. Yes, we can chuck the weather center in the box there, and I am over spending on an engagement right now. There's no real point in doing this, other than the fact that you can use that in the next engagement period in case you get some bad options, basically. Facility wise, we are also looking good. Probably do want to upgrade our hospitality area before we go into next year. But I'm probably not going to do 2 levels, so we can do this a little bit later on. Team Hub and Race Sim is also important to upgrade, but at this point, there isn't anything we desperately need to do with our money, so we'll just leave things as they are. With the underfloor and the side pod design, or rather manufacturing, complete, we can take a look at this new one. As you can see, we barely lose anything by using this and gain a lot of top speed. Let's go ahead and make 4 of these to begin with. That's going to be our underfloor issue solved. And if you want to have a quick count of your parts, just go into the car screen. It's easier than going through each part individually. And we're going to go ahead here and make probably 4 rear wings. That should keep us sorted for a while. And we're also, of course, going to make underfloors once we get a little bit of money here. That looks good. I just want to kind of speed along here now until we get to that next research, because again, I'm going to go through every research that we are doing for the second half of the season, so you can kind of get an idea of what you should focus on. Our driver's leveled up there. And the affiliates update. This is a new bug, by the way. Oh, sorry. This is actually not a new bug. The list was just launched, so I thought it was a new bug, but it wasn't. But basically 1.6, you can get a list of every affiliate. So keep that in mind. For our training here, we are going to focus on getting that pit stop time down, rather the pit stop error chance down. I want to keep that at around 80 for this first season. And after we've done that, we can start working on getting the time down. I'm going to get this sorted real quick. So here we are. This is what we've done for our pit crew training. We get under 2.7 seconds, which is pretty decent. With that, we can finally speed along now until we get to that next research. Front wing research has been completed, and with that, we're going to take a quick look at it. We have used CFD, which means that front wing and rear wing now both have gotten one infusion of that. And generally, we aren't going to be doing anything with the front and the rear wing unless we decide to use a second CFD period on either of these, which honestly, probably is not going to happen, let's be perfectly honest. So for the remainder here, we are going to be focusing on improving our suspension, the other four parts, and we are going to be trying to increase our tire preservation going into next year. So we're going to be focusing top speed, tire preservation on your suspension. Low speed, downforce, and airflow is something you can also do as an added bonus, but generally just tire preservation and your drag reduction is going to be your two biggest gains on the suspension this year. I have been using low speed and airflow front earlier, but generally it is mostly just due to the fact that it's a carryover from last year, and I still feel like cornering is really, really strong. But tire preservation definitely has its role to play this year, so I would definitely focus a little bit more on that. So probably going to focus tire preservation, top speed for a couple of researches, and if we see the cornering fall too far behind, we just focus that to make up. Next up, we have Netherlands in 16 days. Do we have any more projects going in before then? We have a chassis. Let's see what that chassis looks like. So our chassis here has been finished, and with that, we're going to start another chassis basically immediately, which should be fine. We're going to focus the same things, drag reduction and airflow middle. We want to get these up. That top speed gain is pretty decent. Cornering is very decent. So chassis is actually quite important this year, just from that. Now, I'm also going ahead and denied a really, really good random event, which is a design center improvement, which gives you 6 slots. Now, financially, we only have 6 million, which is why I refused it. But if you have money to kind of spend on it, it can be very, very profitable to do so. It's going to give you 2 extra slots, which means a lot more research. In our case, though, that wouldn't really help us because we can't really afford it. So I denied the event. We might also end up replacing Harmon here, as he has been offered a deal from Williams. So we'll have to see. We might need to find ourselves a new technical chief as well. His contract runs out, well, in 2025. So we'll have to see if they actually end up snatching him or not. Summer break is over, and the car that we have here is still pretty decent. 5th, 7th, and 9th when it comes to cornering. We have put on the new top speed modifier. We're still lacking compared to Red Bull, but we aren't actually too far behind. Next year it's going to look a lot better. We're severely behind though in high speed. I'll be honest about that. Now, we've also built up a pretty decent amount of parts here, and we should be fine with parts for the rest of the season. Generally, after summer break, if you gain 6 of everything and a little bit extra in terms of your wings, that's going to be good. Basically, you're building a little bit of buffer towards the end of the year. And the last 4 or so races, you probably will not have to make parts at all if you do it kind of like this. But yeah, we're going to go to Zandvoort. We're going to be, again, simulating. Let's see how we do. Before we get to simulating Zandvoort, however, we have another issue, and that is, of course, the fact that the ERS has gone bye-bye. We are going to eat the penalty here, which is also one of the reasons why I did not take the event, because we have to pay for a new ERS. It's just how things are. Sometimes you break something and you need to fix it. We're probably also going to need to buy a new gearbox towards the end of the season, but we'll just have to manage the parts as best as we can. Gasly should be somewhat okay, but even he might need a new ERS by the end of this year. Hopefully we can manage. Remains to be seen, however. We are just gonna speed through by simulating, as mentioned. If you do struggle with any of these races, feel free to give, ask in the comments. I'll try and respond in a hopefully timely manner. And Ocon here is eating a 19th place penalty. Gasly starting 7th, so he might have a little bit of a good result here. Let us see.
What a masterclass drive from Pierre Gasly today.
A masterclass drive from Gasly. What does that mean? Oh. I love this game. It's a masterclass drive from Gasly, but Ocon overtook him, starting 11 places down. That's an interesting one. Let's put it like that. However, this is a good weekend for us. We score points. The others don't score too many points. With that, as I mentioned, we are probably kind of locked into 4th place. As I mentioned here, Harman might get poached, and he has actually done that. He is going to Williams starting next year. With that, we need to find a new technical chief, and interestingly enough, both Cadil, who has started a new contract with Ferrari, and also Vac is available, and he hasn't actually started a new contract, which means we can propose one. And with the new system that got introduced this patch, signing bonuses doesn't really affect your sign-on chances. Basically, it's the same as adding salary. In this case, we're just going to offer him a 4.8 million salary a year. It might sound like a lot of money, but it's not really, and it's not going to be an issue. Okay, so also we could probably fix this by just lowering the breakout clause to say 0. But I'll just keep it at 50 and pay him an extra 100,000 a year. That's not going to be a problem for us. Let's see if we can pick up back here for free. That would be amazing. With that, we should have actually a complete overhaul of our staff. We have also a lot of the Mini, Kabir, Nakamura, Berta. A lot of our affiliates are getting poached. And honestly, that is a positive for us. We've also picked up a minor issue on the engine, and that too is just something we're just going to have to live with here for the time being. Let's go to Monza, 4 days. We have no projects happening before then, so let's see what we can do there. So simulating is not going very well. Ocon has had a second DNF. Gasly ended up 6th, which is again very good for us, but simulating here is definitely doing something funny with the lap times, as you can see. Which is kind of interesting. But let's see here now if we might need to buy new components for Ocon again. It could be that the minor failure that he had on the engine has escalated, and that could be an issue. Underfloor and side pod has been researched, which is also good. But I'm curious what happened here. The engine has not completely failed. He also has picked up some suspension damage, which kind of hints towards him having a bit of an incident. So unfortunately, not really a result of the car immolating, if you will. It has also picked up a lot of damage to the fresh gearbox. This was 100%. And also picked up damage on the ERS. So he has actually crashed. It's not actually a incident, if you will. I'm gonna have to buy him a new gearbox at the very least. We also had a month to go over here, but yeah, research is good currently, and I'm a little bit unsure what I want to invest the CFD time into, because CFD has just finished, or rather become available again. Let's take a quick look at our research. The front wing here has gotten a huge amount of gains, as you can see. The rear wing 2 has gotten a huge amount of gains. And the question is, should I invest into, say, the chassis, the side pod, or something else? I think actually we might invest into suspension with this CFD period. We have 2 CFD periods remaining. And if I were to say invest into our suspension, that'd be worth... Excuse me. Would that be worth it? Almost 10% gain for cooling, 31 top speed, 10, 19. It's not a massive gain, particularly if we take, say, the rear wing and compare it with. This is generally why I invest most of my CFD and wind tunnel time into rear and front wing. That way I don't need to do any more investment, if you will, because they just get more progression, if you will. 23, 31, 6. It's very similar actually to the sidepod, so we might do a sidepod here, but it is a good idea to just do this where you kind of compare a little bit about what the gains are. Let's see what we can do. And Front Wing might still be benefiting from another CFD period, honestly. 38 low speed is actually quite a huge amount. Could also get an extra percentage tire preservation. And again, the main benefit that we get by investing another CFD period into, say, our front wing or our rear wing here is that we can guarantee that we don't need to do that next year. We don't need to do like a double development cycle next year at the start of the season because it takes longer and costs more. So I am kind of tempted to do front wing again, but we can probably do that towards the end of the season. I think we're going to wait for the suspension here to be done and make a decision then. And we are just going to do a very simple side pod. And we're going to do a very simple underfloor here. That is still going to keep us somewhat competitive. Sorry about the noises. I have hiccups and a bit of a sore throat from speaking too much today. So there is a little bit of that going on as well. Yeah, we're going to wait for the suspension research to finish, and then we'll make a decision on if we invest CFD into our suspension, or if we do maybe rear wing and front wing again with the final 2 periods. That way we can put any CFD that we get next year into, say, underfloor, suspension, side pods, or chassis at the start of the year, and then save the next 5 periods for research. Quick training site schedule. I'll get this sorted real quick, and then we'll head into our next race here in Baku. So the picker training we're going to be doing this month is basically mainly focused on the estimated pit stop times down. Going to get a little bit of a chance mistake going up due to the fact that we're tired. But honestly, it's all going to be a good gain this time around. Now, we are still going to get another research before Baku that I kind of forgot about, the suspension. So let us get the sponsor plan set up. Let's get that research. Then we will get the next race done. But as you can see, all of our affiliates is also kind of being dragged away here at the moment, which is fine by me. Again. Okay. Got a little bit of money there from the sponsor plan, which is good. We do need to save up money. Let's see here. Staff performance is fine, honestly, to sacrifice a little bit. So we'll do that. With that, we'll get our current sponsor engagements done. We'll have to see what we do with Ocon. We might force him to use the engine, probably not at Baku, but we do want to try and avoid buying an extra engine at any cost this year. Let's see what Baku has to offer, although we do also have the regulation boat. Suspension research is done. What is the regulation change here? As the race sim also has concern. Let's go ahead and approve that race sim shutdown. Financial changes at top 14, so we're going to vote against that. I don't want the top teams to have more money. I'd rather keep it as is. Research-wise, let us see here if it is worth maybe putting some CFD time into the suspension here, mainly for tire preservation purposes. And it kind of seems already that it is worth it. So let's invest into the suspension here, getting 0.4 kph. 12% tire preservation is actually kind of huge. So let's go ahead and get this research sorted. It's going to bring up our expertise by 15% or so. Close to 60%. And also same here for the drag reduction. So, well, I could invest into cornering, as you see here. That's going to really mess up the tire preservation. And so far, from what I've seen, tire preservation is actually quite powerful because, again, it slows down the degradation of the tires. But let's go to Baku now. Everything should be sorted. Before we get to Baku, however, Baku has accepted our contract here. As you can see, we're going to go ahead and confirm that hire. And with that now, we have Back, we have Balbo, and we have Wheatley. We basically wrung the Red Bull team dry when it comes to staff. We've also been able to keep both of our race engineers. We should probably get Peck a new contract here just to be on the safe side. But so far, next year, everything is looking amazing when it comes to the staff. So clearly Baku is favoring us here. We ended up 4th and 5th, meaning we scored 18 points. Williams also scored points, and Hulkenberg as well. So these simulations do cause a little bit of mayhem. I believe that is the Haas team's first point. So simulation is definitely throwing a wrench in the plans. Aston scored points, Williams scored points, Haas scored points, and we also extended our gap quite a bit here. So we'll take that going into the next race weekend. I think also this is the first time I've ever seen this where everyone has voted against a regulation change. That's amazing. And the racing has no signs of structural damage, so we are very, very good. Singapore's in 4 days. We have the chassis coming in before that, so let's see how that looks. I think we are just going to get 2 or so percentage points again, which shouldn't be too much. But it should still be very, very good. Doohan has actually got an external offer, and as mentioned here, if we're going to be putting Doohan in the seat next year, we are going to use an editor for it, because we don't have 30 million to throw away to put Doohan in the editor. I'll be perfectly honest. So chassis has been sorted. We get about 3% expertise gain. And we're just going to do this again. That's the thing. We're just going to keep on doing the same research here where we kind of boost our drag reduction, where we boost our airflow middle, and we'll boost maybe our engine cooling later on, because it doesn't really matter much gains right now. We'll be able to boost that to half a percentage point, but we lose performance in exchange. So we're just going to focus cooling on our sidepod. We're going to focus performance on the chassis. And we're going to keep this research going till the end of the year. We've done front wing, we've done rear wing. So we are looking very, very good right now. Let's go to Singapore. It should be another good result, although our car is ranked pretty poorly here, 20th on the grid. As expected here, we ended up 15th and 16th on a track that really does not suit us. So we'll take that. It should still be money. In terms of the top 10 here, we have both Mercs in the points. We have an RB in 4th place, which is bad for us. But simulating is definitely having an effect on how often cars are getting lapped. So I don't know if I can wholeheartedly endorse simming, but it is keeping us in our current position. So at least that is a positive. But if this keeps up, I think RB might overtake Mercedes as the 5th best team before the end of the year. Now, we're probably also going to need to buy a new gearbox for Ocon, as his car has destroyed his new gearbox. That is his final gearbox, as you can see. We can use this one, but generally we are going to be needing a new gearbox fairly soon. Austin is in 25 days, however, so we have plenty of time to make more parts. But yeah, the car of Ocon is needing a new part here, let's be honest. There's no way around that one. Doohan is going to Red Bull next year. It is what it is. Nothing we can do with it at that point. Yeah, let's see what we have coming. We have underfloor and sidepod in 12 days. We also have the month tick over, and we set up our plan here for set up our pit crew training. This should do the job. We're getting closer now to 2.5 second flat, which would be very, very nice to get to. And also, as mentioned here, 4 days now, we're going to get underfloor and the sidepod research. But generally, as I mentioned before, we're just going to restart them with the same parameters, basically, because we're just trying to get as much expertise as we can in each part's strength, more so than anything else. And if we don't actually, for some of these parts like the underfloor, it's not really fully focusing on the strength because we're focusing on every type of cornering. But we are kind of trying to get the most performance that we can out of the part. And with the underfloor, it's kind of focusing every type of cornering. We still have another 23 days until we get the next CFD period. So we are going to focus a little bit more here on the airflow middle. Have I focused the wrong one here? Or we're just that far behind in airflow middle. I think we are. So let's get that sorted. There we go. But yeah, suspension in a week. That should be the huge bonus. And we're probably just going to restart another one. The suspension research has been completed. And as you can see here, these are some pretty extreme gains, particularly on tire preservation. And we're actually just going to go ahead and start another research right away we focus on getting a little bit more tire preservation here going. If we can get this up to 70 or 80%, that's going to be amazing going into next year. Reality is probably going to be closer to 60% if we're lucky. By the time that we're getting to Austin, we're halfway throughout October, and this is basically the time where we can start to consider upgrading some of our facilities. We're not going to upgrade any of the car development facilities. However, we are going to go ahead and upgrade the race sim to level 2, because the low condition is going to be a mentality factor. Basically, yourself and drivers don't like having low condition facilities. So instead of refurbishing, we're just going to upgrade it. And we're going to do the same here with the hospitality area. We're going to go ahead and upgrade that one right away, because that one is actually going to give us a boost next year to our marketability and in turn our sponsorships. I'm also going to go ahead and refurbish the other 2 buildings because, well, we kind of need to. You could wait a little bit further towards the end of the season, and I would probably recommend that. But genuinely, I am afraid that I'm going to forget, so I'm just going to get it done now. We still have a little bit of money left over, and you would like to have 10 to 20 million in your bank when we take over into the second year. So we do need to kind of save a little bit of money right now. With that said, we are going to head to Coda. Let's see how that race weekend treats us. We are also going to be buying a new gearbox there. We might end up using this one, but most likely we're going to buy a new one. Since it was sprint weekend, we elected not to take advantage of the new gearbox here. We're going to do that next race. Fortunately, Ocon ends up 15th. But that's actually acceptable because that puts us squarely in the receive money zone. So this works out just fine. Again, we don't really care about our positions here as long as we make that 16th place cutoff for financial gain. Now, the gearbox is in poor condition. And honestly, I put a new gearbox in, but as you can see, he immediately destroyed that one as well. So he definitely is going to need a new one this race weekend. There's no way around that. We're also going to go ahead and make one probably final suspension for this year. At this point, we have all our parts. We don't really need to mess around too much with it. Chassis is finished. Let's go ahead and make another design. Although we do have CFD in 5 days, I still think we're going to put that on the front wing. I think that is just the best choice. It's either that we put it on the front wing, or that we're going to go ahead and put our next research back into the suspension potentially. Because again, tire preservation is actually pretty decent. Done a few tests. I'll probably make a video on it at one point, but it seems to be really, really powerful on most tracks. Okay, let's get through practice here, and we're going to get that new gearbox for Ocon, and we'll see exactly how we do here in Mexico.
We return once more.
Don't want to do directly the race, we just want to get through practice. Like that. Now, we are going to go ahead and buy that new car part. We still have plenty of cost cap remaining, 20 million with a couple of months remaining. So I'm not worried about the cost cap. It would suck, however, if we need to buy a new engine. So Ocon genuinely has to survive on the engines that he has left. And for Gasly, he has a lot of stuff still remaining, so he's still fine. Okay. Let's get through qualifying, get through a race here, see if Ocon can make another bit of comeback. But honestly, at this point, as you can imagine, we're in Mexico. There's no way that we are going to be losing out. So I think we're just going to be skipping the remaining races here. It is going to be a wet race, which could make things interesting. But honestly, again, 16th or higher, and we're going to be very, very happy. It was a masterclass from Ocon and Gasly. Both of them managed to get in the points. And once again, everyone is lapped. Now, 1.6 did change starting points. So if you started basically your save after September, you're probably going to have a pretty decent starting point. You're probably not going to be seeing as much lapped as I do in this series. So keep that in mind as well. But yeah, we completed that. A good result here for Ocon in Brazil. Also for the Kick Sauber with Valtteri scoring points. Gasly managed to get 15th here, which is worrisome because that kind of hints towards him having trouble. But we are still just extending that gap really to Mercedes. So 4th place, here we come. 3 race weekends remaining. I don't think there's anything that is going to be, causing any issues there. So we're just going to speed through the races here. I'm going to be focusing on the research towards the end here because nothing is really going to change, I would think. Gasly has picked up damage on his ERS though. But as I mentioned, at this point, we don't really care where we finish. We're just going to use his ERS for practice, which is fine. That should be a-okay. Now, we have the underfloor and the sidepod getting done here in 3 days. So we'll get that done before Vegas. We're just going to acknowledge the delay here of the construction. It doesn't really matter if it's delayed as long as we get it done before we go into the next month. So that's not really a problem. Let us go ahead here and get those 2 research done. Underfloor and sidepods are coming in, and we are getting a couple of percentage points across the board, 2 to 3%. We do like what we see. Now, as I mentioned here, I might go ahead and invest another CFD period into the front wing, and honestly, I think it's a good idea to do. We get a lot of cornering from this front wing, and that is kind of huge just on its own. We could go all in on cornering if we really, really felt like it, sacrifice airflow sensitivity. But I genuinely think that getting low speed cornering from this is going to be far more important long term. We are going to get a little bit of tire preservation. It's not let's face it, it's not a huge amount of low speed cornering, but this is going to set us up for the future. Now, there is, of course, also a different perspective to this, which is the fact that we are having a big regulation change next year. So honestly, if you consider it from that perspective, putting it into, say, the sideboards could work simply because of the fact that we want to diversify our expertise. We don't really want to max out the front wing or the rear wing because we are losing half of their expertise next year anyways. And while you could argue that having a lower starting point for something like your sidepod could be huge, I think it's fine to invest into it, honestly. 7.54% cooling would help next year to make sure we survive. So let's diversify here. Generally, I would invest into the front wing or the rear wing. But in this case, I think it is fine to do things a little bit differently because, as I mentioned, the big regulation change is going to shake things up anyways. However, with that said, we are just going to speed through at this point, I think. We're going to try and get towards the end of the year. I am going to start another suspension research at the second this one is done. So let's see what we end up with there. The second to last suspension design, or rather research, has finished here. And we're just going to do another one right out of the back here. There's no point in not doing it. So we are going to sort that, get another 2% of tire preservation. We can live with that. And as I mentioned, this is going to be the final research because we won't have time enough to start another one. And even with the chassis here, it's going to be pretty close for us to start another one. But that's really it. We're going to start another chassis research, and that is all we'll be able to do this year. So with that said, I am going to get through Las Vegas. I'm going to simulate Lusail, and I'm going to simulate Yas Island. And unless we spend money or anything like that, we're just going to do a summary once we get to the end of Yas. So here we are. We have simulated to the end of the year at Abu Dhabi. And if we have gotten both cars in the points here, rather than top 16, which apparently we failed to do, we should have gotten a decent chunk of money. Gasly, however, did end up last. Ocon scores our last points of the year. We end up 7th and 8th in the Driver Championship, which is decent. And we do remain in 4th place. As I mentioned, at that point, there wasn't really anything we could gain or lose. There's no way we catch up to Red Bull, McLaren, or Ferrari. And I kind of severely doubted Mercedes or Aston catching up to us either. So that was my reason for simulating the second half of this season. There was no real point to playing it because, well, the races would have been fun. I have a lot of other projects that I also want to do after this one. So rather than spending 2-3 episodes going through the last race of the season, it's fine to sim them in my mind. I am open to, this agreement here. So if you don't like me simming things like this in this scenario, let me know. But in this case, as I mentioned, because there isn't anything that would have changed our position in any way, shape, or form, I decided that it was acceptable. But yeah, Red Bull wins title. We end up 4th place, beat Mercedes, Aston, RB. I think we can be very, very happy with that. Antonelli has won the Drivers' Championship in F2, which means we could sign him into a car next year. But let's face it, we're not going to do that. We're going to stick with the drivers that we have. Because signing in into any of our cars is going to be bloody expensive. 25 million, 25 million. We don't have enough million right now. We've actually saved up a lot of money to carry over into next year. And as you can see now, we are going into the last remnant of our research. But honestly, we're going to do the end of year summary. We're going to look at how our car looks going into next season before we end this video. So yeah, aside from that, pit crew wise, we have set up training here. We're focusing mainly on getting the pit stop time down. We're going to get 7%, 2.5 seconds average stops. And that's going to be a good starting point for next year. Staff is going to get, as you can see, a little bit of replaced here. Hopefully there's no glitches that stops that. So I'm really looking forward to heading into this next season. So I'm just going to sim through December and then we'll jump into the summary and see how we stack up with our car in the second year. So here we are. We are approaching the end of the year here, although we had a little bit of an interruption there. Everything is sorting. We have 10 driver contracts ending, which kind of tells me that every single one of our affiliates has been poached, and our marketability has gone up to 625, which should be good for next year. The HL, we probably did horribly, is what I would think. Yeah, we end up 10th, 600,000, that's nothing. Ocon 7th, 8th, 4 total. Our team rating goes up to 4 stars. I actually lost some heritage, interestingly enough, but we'll take that. So yeah, research has been completed. Regulation changes. We get an extra gearbox and an extra DRS next year, which kind of makes it interesting in the sense that I might actually go ahead and pick something other than Mercedes. But let's be honest, I would recommend using a Mercedes engine in your second year. We also had a very easy regulation here with the -5 across the board. So let's take a quick look at now and see how does the base car look versus our rivals going into this next year. We're going to be accepting a season target of 4th. Basically, they want me to do what I've already done. Okay. Let's see if we can do another one. Financially, we have just barely gone through with a positive here. We're going to get the payout with our sponsors. But yeah, it's good to save up around 20-25 million before you go into a new season. Technically, a huge amount of gain here for our chassis. We'll take that, about 20% in our 2 most important stats, airflow and drag reduction, and around 10% in the other 2 stats. Front wing, CFD used, has given us a huge amount of gain. Not as much maybe as I wanted, but still a huge chunk. Rear wing, done the same, a huge chunk gain here, about 15-20%. Side pods, we invested a lot into this, particularly in the engine cooling, 20% gained. We gained 26% in the airflow middle, which is huge. Underfloor, not really a huge amount gained compared to what we lost. We didn't really get too much investment into it, but the cornering should still help. And you can see the same here with the suspension, huge gains across the board. 35% or so tire preservation gained is kind of mental. We'll take that going into next year. So, here we are, next year. Let's see if we see any interesting... Apparently, I've already broken the email. Affiliates. I don't think I have any affiliates anymore. They all got picked up by the AI, which honestly is not a bad thing. The affiliate system right now isn't in a good state. So, I'll have to go over that a little bit later. We are losing some stats. We'll deal with that next time around. But our car is actually looking a lot better than what we saw next season, or last season. Now, generally, you're probably going to look at this and think that I'm screwed. I haven't really improved. But the reality of the situation is you have improved. And the best way to kind of look at that is to look at this, compare us to, say, Red Bull. As you can see, we aren't too far behind. And if we now go into, say, our design, even just a small suspension design here as an example, we can get up to 70% tire preservation. That's going to be kind of insane. We can also go ahead and take a look at our underfloor. Focus it on cornering, for instance, and see our gains. And that's +4, +6, +4. And that's from a very simple game. And again, we can do this again on the side pod. We can do it on the chassis. And as you can see, once we get all these parts made, because the AI doesn't really specialize, we are going to be having a very, very good car that probably is going to struggle to get in title for this year. But it's going to be a lot more fun to play than last year's car, where 4th and maybe a win or 2 is basically the limit of the vehicle. So yeah, next time we'll be focusing on how to build a great car before Sakir. But this has been the end of this one. I apologize that I decided to do things a little bit in a boring way, maybe. Just summarizing the second half of the season in one video. There's a couple of reasons why I did this, as I mentioned, to speed progression up a little bit. But also because I genuinely don't feel too well today. It's my second attempt at trying to record this. It's late at night. So I apologize that it isn't probably very good. It's probably a little bit disjointed at times. But even so, I appreciate you for following this series, for watching this, and as I mentioned, next time, we'll be building a car for Sakir. Thank you for watching, and I shall see you next time. Bye-bye.